My name is Brad, and I am a Blue Water Navy Agent Orange veteran. To construct a successful Agent Orange presumed exposure VA disability claim, a veteran will need a medical diagnosis of an Agent Orange-related medical condition and evidence showing their presence in a location designated as exposed to Agent Orange. For a Blue Water Navy veteran, that presence is usually based on service on a vessel documented as being in an AO-exposed location. This presentation will focus on where those locations are and how a Blue Water Navy veteran can obtain evidence proving that vessel's exposure. There is a lot of inaccurate information on the internet about what qualifies a Navy veteran as exposed to Agent Orange. For VA disability claim purposes, presumed exposure means service in a location where the law has defined or the VA has determined there was a presence of the toxic herbicides generally referred to as Agent Orange. In the following guide, we'll try to clarify the eligibility locations as of April of 2024, and will refer to eligible exposure areas simply as the zone. Prior to 2020, Agent Orange exposure eligibility was limited to boots on the ground in South Vietnam or to brown water Navy personnel who operated on the inland waters between the DMZ on the north and the border with Cambodia on the south. The Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veterans Act added coastal waters of South Vietnam as presumed exposure areas. Presence in this zone, left of the red line, for any length of time between January 9, 1962 and May 7, 1975 would qualify the vessel and her crew as presumed exposed to Agent Orange. In this view, the light blue line is the declared combat zone where we receive combat pay, we earned the Vietnam Service Medal, mail was free, and cigarettes were 10 cents a pack, but it does not designate Agent Orange exposure. Now we'll take a look at how the zone was configured. There are frequent incorrect internet posts that say the zone is 12 miles from the coast of Vietnam. The correct boundaries are shown in this image, where the black line is known as the baseline of South Vietnam's national border waters, as defined by international law. The red line is 12 nautical miles seaward of the black baseline, and is the line Congress used to define the Agent Orange presumed exposure zone. So any ship inside the red line is considered by law as exposed to Agent Orange. So you can see that particularly along the southern coast, the zone extends out to about 90 nautical miles. Next, we'll explore how VA determines if and when a ship entered the zone. In 2019, VA scanned all of the 1962 to 1975 deck logs of vessels that deployed to Westpac and then electronically extracted the 0800, 1200, and 2000 daily location reports into a computerized system they call the Ship Locator Tool. VA doesn't publicize exactly how they handle the next steps in the claim process, but we believe they enter a claimant's documented dates of service and vessel names into the locator tool and receive a report similar to this example view for the USS Hancock in 1962. For this example, they would see that Hancock approached the zone in April. On closer examination, it appears that she came within about 3/4 of a mile of the zone, but did not enter. Although they would search for other evidence of exposure, they would not find any, so the claim would likely be denied. What VA doesn't see is the Hancock's movements between the 3 daily reported locations. If we draw lines between the daily position reports from the 15th of April, we can see that Hancock approached the zone at 0800 and departed to the north after 1200. Reading the log entries between those two times shows that she was involved in air operations in the immediate area. Using a process known as dead reckoning and plotting her movements turn by turn shows that she did in fact enter the zone 3 different times in those 4 hours, which would make her eligible for presumed Agent Orange exposure. Since VA does not have the resources to do dead reckoning, a veteran would need to submit their own formal dead reckoning report as evidence supporting a claim for Agent Orange exposure, even though it might require a lengthy appeal to get it accepted by VA. Information about how to obtain a formal dead reckoning report and on other exposure evidence resources will be provided at the end of this presentation. Next, we'll look at special cases like carriers, guided missile ships, and submarines. Auxiliary ships and smaller combatants were frequently in the exposure zone as part of their routine assignments. but carriers and missile ships generally operated farther offshore or in the Tonkin Gulf, well outside the Agent Orange exposure zone, and their crew members are routinely denied exposure. However, this view represents the more than 500 dates in times VA's ship locator tool acknowledges carriers entered the Agent Orange exposure zone for a variety of reasons like typhoon evasion, UNREPs, southern air operations, transits to Thailand, USO shows, etc. These do not include numerous situations like the USS Hancock that we just reviewed. Obtaining submarine Agent Orange exposure evidence has special challenges, since their operational details during the Vietnam era remain highly classified, and deck log entries while on patrol were usually limited to simply special operations or underway as before. However, when transiting from port to port, detailed logs were often maintained, even when passing through the AO exposure zones. This view shows the approximately 250 vessel exposure dates VA found when they scanned the unclassified deck logs in 2020. Each of these has a corresponding log or other documentation at the sources described at the end of this presentation. In addition, submarines often traveled to Thailand for exercises with the Thai Navy and for Liberty Port visits to Bangkok. They generally stayed well outside of the Agent Orange zone, but sometimes entered the zone when rounding the southern tip of the Khao Mau Peninsula. If this happened in between the documented daily position reports, VA would have no way of detecting that and would deny any related claims. Like the Hancock discussed earlier, a veteran would have to supply a dead reckoning plot to prove exposure. Next, we'll look at several new locations outside of Vietnam that have been added to the list of exposed areas. In Thailand, Navy vessels stopping at any U.S. or Thai Navy base between January of 1962 and June 1976 are now presumed exposed. Small Navy vessels like submarines, minesweepers, and auxiliaries sometimes tied up at the Thai Navy Pier in downtown Bangkok, while some larger ships moored further south at the U.S. Navy port complex in Sattahip. Evidence of a presence in either one of these two ports would require a specific reference in a deck log. However, it is more likely a vessel would be anchored out, with crew members ferried back and forth by motor whaleboat or water taxi, and likely not be considered exposed by VA. The island of Guam was also added because of Agent Orange use there, or possibly temporarily stored there for further distribution to Vietnam. With the presence of major support facilities, it was a frequent stop for submarines and small vessels in the Western Pacific, and served as a refueling stop for many ships transiting back and forth between Vietnam and the U.S. mainland. Vessels entering the 12-mile territorial waters of Guam from January of 1962 to July of 1980 would be presumed exposed to Agent Orange. PACT Act also added the territorial waters of American Samoa as AO presumed exposed due to limited vegetation control use there. After a Vietnam deployment, ships were sometimes assigned to show the flag at several Australian and New Zealand ports on their way back to the States. Because of the long distances, a fuel stop was required at remote Pago Pago, Samoa, before proceeding on to Pearl Harbor. All crew members on board vessels entering Samoa territorial waters from January of 1962 to July of 1980 would be considered exposed. The Department of Defense has created and is continually updating a list of all locations around the world where Agent Orange or other similar herbicides were stored or tested between 1945 and 1977. The VA is developing a process to use this list to designate additional locations of presumed exposure of military personnel. The vast majority of these current locations are not associated with any U.S. Navy vessels and will not be addressed in this presentation. However, various veterans organizations are proposing the addition of 2 locations that could have a significant impact on Navy vessel exposures. If these locations are eventually added to the list, relevant information will quickly show up on the resources discussed next in this presentation. The fastest and easiest way to obtain that evidence is to use one of the only 2 sites that specialize in Vessel Agent Orange exposure eligibility research. The first is our free public service Facebook group, Blue Water Navy Agent Orange Veterans, which can be found by entering the full name into your browser or Facebook search box. This site has a database of over 180,000 VA acknowledged eligible vessel dates and times, and thousands more that were developed independently. Answer the 2 new member questions, and then join the group. Once accepted, create a new post with the header log request, followed by the vessel name and approximate dates on board. Within 24 to 48 hours, you should receive a copy of an eligible deck log with the date, time, and location the vessel entered in Agent Orange exposure location. If there is no available eligible log, then follow-up research will be done in our library of additional sources. You can also request a PDF file containing clickable links to these and other research sources. The second site is the Blue Water Navy Association and is run by the same folks that spearheaded the Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veterans Act of 2019 and the PACT Act of 2022. They have a vessel database similar to the Blue Water Navy Agent Orange Veterans Facebook group, and for a small subscription fee, they do lookups and provide eligible logs if available. Subscribers also have access to Dead Reckoning services, as well as a wealth of other Blue Water Navy-related information on their website at bwnvva.org. If you prefer doing your own research, or you just want to look around, the U.S. National Archives U.S. Navy Deck Logs collection is a good place to start. Ultimately, a deck log showing vessel presence in AO exposed waters is the best evidence for supporting an AO disability claim. Using the National Archives search system can be challenging at first. We would recommend checking out our earlier YouTube video explaining how to search for a specific vessel. To locate that video, enter the term NARA, Navy Deck Logs 2024 into the YouTube search box as shown. This concludes our presentation on Agent Orange exposure locations. Please subscribe to our channel for additional videos on topics related to the Blue Water Navy. If you have additional questions, we invite you to visit us at our Facebook page by entering the name Blue Water Navy Agent Orange Veterans into your browser or Facebook search box. Thank you for giving us a look.